And welcome to the Barry Foster Show on YouTube, originating from the Ridge Floor Studios in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. I'd like to remind you, if you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for the program, just put them down there below in the comments, and we can answer them and tell the algorithm that we are very responsive to all our listeners. And check the page each and every weekday. We're going to try to have something new up on Monday through Friday. And please like and subscribe our YouTube page and join our pages at the Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram. That would be very, very, very helpful. As you heard on Monday, we have some new equipment. I just got a new mixer and set up a studio, which Sandra and I were using for Florida Fun Travel. And we have some sponsorships in the works as well. And if you'd like to be as a sponsorship, just drop us a line at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com. We have an introductory offer. We're not going to take any more than 4. 4 is going to be the outside limit. But we have you get an open, close, and a mention during the program. So we went from being a talk show host to being an engineer. And the engineering is still, by the way, a work in progress. We're still working on that. And then we're going to go now to sponsorships. By the way, I have some really good news for you. I don't know what it is right now, but as of Monday, I saw the lowest gas price I've seen in Highlands County in more than a decade, $2.69.
I filled up on the way, because I had to go to Orlando yesterday, so I filled up on the way back. And because the difference in price between Sebring and Lake and Avon Park right now is about 12 cents a gallon.
And it's more than that for Lake Placid.
Well, it could be.
Lake Placid, when we were down there, it was like $2.90.
Yeah.
And then $2.80 in Sebring, and then $2.70 here.
But I filled up, and even on the way up. Now, on the way up, when you get into Lake Wales, the prices are still pretty good. When you get to Haines City, they take a jump.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah, because that's what I saw when I was up there yesterday. And but on the way back, I stopped and filled up for, $2.71.
$2.71.
$2.71, which is at Walmart here on Sunday afternoon when I came back. And so I thought that was good because I had filled up Friday at $2.82 down in Sebring. And so on. So it was a difference of 11 cents.
The 25, 35, 45 cent jump is coming.
Oh, yeah. I feel it. Probably tomorrow. That's why I filled up yesterday. I said, no, I'm not going to take a chance because Tuesday is coming. And, it may take that usual jump up to 319 or 311 or 312 or whatever it's going to be.
I after we were in the motorcade, I took a car and topped it off at $2.75. This one I've got out in the parking lot now. I'm going to top it off at $2.69, and then you kind of motor for a week until the prices come back down again. So it's a little game they play, and laugh all the way to the bank.
Well, it's interesting because it appears from what I've seen, and I think most everybody else has seen during the Trump administration so far this time, they have gotten some, whether it's because of oil drilling or whatever the ramifications are, the price of gas has definitely come down, probably on average, I'm going to say in this area, maybe 75 to 85 cents a gallon, all right? But I did listen to an economist this weekend, and he said that don't expect that food prices are appreciably going to come down over the long haul, because he said this is the new norm. And he said it's pretty well set. You might be able to see a few things modulate up and down, but he said overall, if you think the $13 a pound steak is going to come down to $8 a pound, he said don't count on it.
Well, eggs have come down quite a bit from when Biden got out.
Yeah, but I mean, you take a look at, and I walk by it every week, like a lot of people. I walk by the meat counter just to look. Just to look. And I mean, $12, $14, $16, $18 a pound, for some kind of beef. And I'm thinking, holy Toledo, I guess I'm going to eat more chicken and fish.
Well, there's a place close to where we are, and I think it's a phenomenon which is spreading, and we have a program on this with Baxter Troutman and Dark Hammock, and his idea of butchering beef, selling it at sides, a whole steer, half steer, and getting the prices down. And there's two there's two benefits. Number one, it's a little bit less expensive, okay? Although for a lot of people, it's gas driving up there.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a little less expensive, and you know where it's been. You don't have to worry about, they have three options. You can get grass-fed, grass and feed, or feed. And the more feed you have, the more marbling that you have in the beef. But there are farmers markets. There's one in Sebring, there's one in Avon Park now, they're all around. You can go around, you can kind of begin to look for the kinds of things that you need to have at a better price. So as you go along, I'm hoping, and there's a guy on the YouTube I've taken to watching, and he's always very cautious about saying, go to mom and pops. Don't use the big companies. And he puts the red over all the stuff that's corporate owned. And he says on the grocery stores, when you find whatever product it is, toothpaste or candy or hair products, whatever, look in the corners. The little corners is where the mom and pops are. The big corporations buy like long pieces of shelf space.
Oh, yeah.
They buy that shelf space. And so if you're looking for cereals, you look up in the corners to find, and he said it doesn't take much to find out who owns some of these companies.
Well, you're still, in some aspects, and I know there's some adjusting that goes on there. It's not, but when you get a buy one, get one free, okay?
BOGOs, yeah.
And I look for that if it's something I absolutely, positively know I'm going to consume. Because a lot of times I used to buy that buy one, get one free, and then I'd put the cans away or whatever it was, and then months later to go in and look, and all the stuff that's in there is like 3 years old.
Yeah.
So the worst thing in the world for me is to do that anymore unless I absolutely know I'm going to consume it.
Well, I have a brother and sister-in-law that when there's a BOGO, let's say it's green beans, they'll buy a case and get a free case, and they put it back, and then they just eat off it for a year, and they stock up like that, and it's a smart way to go. Usually they'll do that to introduce a new product, like we use apple cider vinegar, and then they put an ad out had a BOGO on this product, which was pear cider vinegar. It was pretty good, and it did the same thing. It didn't have quite the bite that the apple had, and of course Sandra's a very organic style person, so she did the research on it, and two things. Number one, it worked well. Number two, it had a great bottle. Glass bottle, it could reseal, so we saved the bottle. So in addition to the pear cider vinegar, we got the container that it went with.
Yeah. So I think that, and when you look at it, I know there's some adjusting in the price. It's not actually one at a price and the other one for free. I mean, they adjust the pricing, but it's still cheaper than buying two individually. If you go back next week and that sale's not on, if you go to buy those items and they're priced individually, now you're going to pay what I call full price.
Yeah, it goes
okay.
Back up.
Yes, right, absolutely. But and the other thing is, I take a look also at expiration dates. Although what I have read lately, it said that if you go strictly by the expiration date, you're throwing away a lot of good food.
That's right.
Because that expiration date, sometimes it'll say expiration date, then other times it'll say if best used by date. Okay, so
I read an article about how water had an expiration date on it. And I thought, this is the same water that's been on the earth for thousands of years. How can it have an expiration date? And someone told me that they think that the expiration date is not for the water. It is for the plastic jug that it's in. And the plastic jugs are only good for so long. And believe me, keep one for, use in the garden or something, and you find out within a very short amount of time it's gone. It just turns brittle and breaks apart.
Well, the other thing, I've had some gallon jugs of water that I bought that actually, the gallon jugs, for no reason at all, developed a leak. I mean, they developed a crack in the plastic, and at that point, you either consume it or you throw it away, one or the other.
So,
but there's a lot of what I call idiosyncrasies when you go to the supermarket and I go by expiration date, I look at what consumes, and I look at two big things for me, salt and and sugar. Those two things that I look at, the percentages and so on. So yeah, there's more to grocery shopping than just grocery shopping.
It requires work from us.
A little detective work.
And the nice thing is, even some of the oldest of the people who are listening here, you can carry your phone with you, and you can look at stuff. And I've told this story before. I'll tell it again. We were looking at corn chips, and I wanted to find out where they were made. And it didn't say anything, but it says, and it was I forget the brand. Anyway, it said, if you have Tostitos, it says, if you have any questions, here's an 800 number to call. This is a Saturday around noon. So I thought, what the heck? Well, so Sand was there shopping, and I called the number. And much to my abject amazement, I got a human being on the other end of the line. And I asked her, I said, look, it said, if I have any questions, where are these made? And she says, where are you? I said, well, I'm standing in the middle of a public store in Sebring, Florida currently. And she said, wait a minute. She says, those were made in Indiana. I said, okay, I'm good with that. Made in USA.
Right.
And we're going to start a series here. Well, we've actually started a series about products that are made in the United States. So you can look, and you can look up some of these things that are the ingredients may or may not be good for you. And the nice thing is, with your phone, you can take a picture, you can enlarge it. And I don't know about Androids, but with an iPhone, you can just use your finger, highlight it, and hit copy, and then put it in your internet search and say, this 13-letter name, what is this? Is it any good for me or not? And you can. I had some corn chips that were supposedly made in the United States, but they had red dye 40 in them, and I looked it up, and it's petroleum based. And I said, well, you said this is supposed to be organic. She says, well, it's approved. The old RFK Jr. Just because it's approved doesn't mean it's good for you.
No.
And I said, I got. They were supposed to be. It was around Independence Day. They were supposed to be red, white, and blue, blah, blah, blah. I said, because I said, look, we can't eat these, even though they're approved, because I'm not going to eat something I try to eat as little that's bad for me as possible. And because it's petroleum-based, we're not going to eat them. And so we get this little boilerplate letter, thanks for looking, blah, blah, blah. But it does, as you say, John, it requires some work for us to eat well, and I think if enough people do this kind of thing, that they will respond, by improving quality and dropping price.
Well, the other thing that, and I purposely, and I know a lot of people think I'm crazy, but I go to the grocery store at 6:30 on Friday morning. And I go there because there's practically no foot traffic at that point. So if you want to spend a second or two standing in the aisle looking at labels, you can do it, because you're not going to get run over by 13 people pushing their cart at a mile an hour, and so on. So that's one of the reasons. But I like to look at labels. I like to see what it is. Calories. How many calories in the thing? When I went this past Friday, for instance, they had soup on sale. I don't eat a lot of soup, but if I'm in a hurry and I don't have time for much, a bowl of soup is it. But I looked at probably 14 or 15 different varieties of this soup to find the one that had the lowest sodium count. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
That's what I had to do, because some of the sodium in soup is like 1,000 milligrams, 1,200 milligrams, 900 milligrams, and I finally found a variety of the soup that was 450, which was the lowest I found. So I said, all right, that's what I'm getting.
And what you can also do is, if you have AI, like if you have Perplexity or ChatGPT or Grok, and I have all three of them on my phone, I can go and say, look, what is the lowest sodium that I can find in tomato soup? I mean, pick a soup that you like.
Yep.
And it'll think, it'll come back and it'll give you a list of the stuff that you can look for, and does your grocery mart carry it? And if it doesn't, you can say, well, are there grocery marts for us, Central Florida, that carry this? I mean, you got Winn-Dixie, Aldi's, Publix, save a lot.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it gets pretty sketchy pretty fast.
Yep.
Walmart,
Yep.
I guess, too.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you can look this kind of thing up, and they say, well, you should just be able to do a internet search for that. This looks all through the internet for you, okay, and it scans all of the things that you'd spend 5-10 minutes looking through this stuff and trying to find what you're looking for.
Yep.
This thing scans it in a matter of seconds.
Well, that would be one of the better parts of
AI.
Better parts of AI, based on the opposite of a lot of what I learned on Friday night when I went to a conference on AI, and what I heard there was very scary. I mean, a large part of it. There were some good parts that they talked about. And one of the things that intrigued me, they said that if you want to look up, like, what could happen to you medically, that if you put certain parts of your, health system, or your how you feel and all of that into the system, it will spit back to you what potential diseases you're about to get. Now, that may be good and bad. Maybe you don't want to know that. Okay,
I don't want to know.
If you don't want to know, then don't do it.
I know people, if they knew, they would get that disease.
Right, but it does do the research based on what information you put into it, and it'll come back and tell you what you're susceptible of getting or having, and so on. So that was the good part about it. But just to jump off a little bit from where we're talking right now, but the scary part was what's happening mainly to young children. And what's happening is young children are going on AI, and they have these ways of grabbing these kids off the internet and bringing them in where the child feels, well, this is my friend. And my friend starts asking me questions.
Yes.
And it says to me, Mary, tell us about yourself. And then once they develop the profile for you, then they start, if they want to, and there's a lot of, I call unscrupulous, I'm not bad actors out there, they start to consume your information, and then they start subliminally shuffling information back to you and saying, well, Mary, you're really not a nice person. Really, your friends, you may think your friends like you, but your friends really hate you. They don't like you at all. And they start working on their mind, and these kids, unfortunately, their mind isn't ready to develop and look at it and say, this is right information, this is bad information, this is good, this is bad, and so on. They start to consume the bad information that's being fed to them, and then all of a sudden they get this attitude that I'm really not worthy.
It's an abusive relationship.
Yeah, I'm not worthy, so obviously the best thing I can do is to commit suicide. And they played a couple film clips of mothers that had gone before Congress and testified to this action, where their children, they were 13 and 14, that had gotten in on AI and developed this. AI developed the profile, and then ultimately convinced them that the best thing they could do is commit suicide, and they did.
Well, I've seen these ads for these AI girlfriends that you can get, and they will talk to you. And now I haven't really tried any of this. I've seen the ads, and they appear that the faces can move, the lips move. They look, you can tell it's AI, but there's a very attractive girl, and you have these heartfelt conversations with them, and you're right, they're stockpiling information on you.
Yes.
And then it goes to the highest bidder, who's ever got that information. He's got a weakness for he likes classic cars, and he's all, especially Fords or Chevys or whatever. They know so much about you that they can go and then use that to get you to buy things, get you to do things. It's scary enough with adults. It's really scary with kids.
It's very scary with kids, and that was what they spent a lot of the time talking about, because they said that you've got to be very, very, very careful about what you allow your children to use, see, watch, consume, and so on. And this one fella who was 24 years old, and he was one of the speakers. I guess he's he's an actor, and he's very knowledgeable on AI and so on. But one of the things he said, I'm married, but he said, I've not have children yet, but I'm working on it. But he said that I have developed my own internet file search thing that'll be the only thing my children will be able to look at. They won't be allowed to look at Google. They won't be allowed to look at any of the regular search engines. I'm going to develop that for them, and I have. And he said what they're going to consume is like old-time movies or old-time stories or whatever, but nothing that can corrupt their mind.
And there was for a while a search engine called Mayberry, which was very much the same as that. PragerU now has put out a whole series of young people's videos, which are not nearly as exciting and well done as some of the evil ones, if you will.
Right.
But nevertheless, there is an effort to do that to help guide the children, because it's the new technology. They're going to be into it, and just face it.
Yeah, and the only way you can literally, unless you absolutely lock everything up in your house, but once your children get their own phone, once they get their own iPad, they have their own computer, they have their own watch, whatever it is, they can start searching anything and everything.
Well, back in the 90s, there was a movie called Sleepless in Seattle, and Tom Hanks is a single father with a son. And the son seems to know a lot about stuff that his dad never taught him about. He goes, how do you know this stuff? He goes, oh, Billy has cable, So they were able to sit and watch movies on cable TV and be educated beyond their years. The same thing is now with these phones. And I was watching this thing about hackers and how we are now in an unlimited war. And the unlimited war, we don't see armies going out and fighting. We don't see naval battles. We don't see air battles. We don't even see battles in space. It's all in the cyber world. It's all in code.
Right.
And it's all being able to do this stuff in code. And the guy says most of the kids that are engaged in this are under the age of 18. Okay? And they get so good. They grow up with this code. They can do so much with it. By the time they get of age, they get hired by companies because they've been hackers. They know how to hack. They get hired by companies to look out for their securities. In fact, this guy was showing this code, and in the middle of this code, you ever remember in the olden days when they would take the signs and the ampersands and they could make a penguin or make a smiley face. This guy made a duck, and beside the duck it said meow, and it was stuck in the code someplace. And the guy said, I don't know who put that there. Maybe they put it there. Maybe a hacker put it there. Who knows? But there is an unlimited war going on now, a world war, because it doesn't matter how many bombs you have, how many missiles you have. You can get into somebody's code and hack them out, whether you're in the Ukraine, whether you're in Israel, whether the United States, China, you name it. That's where the war is going on right now.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, the way I think a lot of these internet companies and other forms of media type that do this, they're looking for the future market. They're not interested in 55-year-old people. They're interested
Boomers.
in 15-year-old people or 12-year-old people or even 8-year-old people, because that's the future. Those are the ones that are going to be buying whatever it is they're selling. It's not you, Grandma and Grandpa. You're never going to go on that site because you're not interested. But little Johnny, little Susie, absolutely. So this is their method to their madness. Capture the children, capture the future market. That's what it's all about.
Well, that is not something that's new. When I was growing up, they were after the kids. I remember if you were cool, you drank Pepsi because of the Pepsi generation. Everything was aimed towards the kids. Very little was, even though it's the moms and dads that bought the washers and dryers, and bought the TV sets, bought the houses, bought the cars. They still put a huge amount of money into the kids because they wanted to have them when they became of age. And it's even worse now because the base ages are just dropping like crazy.
Well, something I just saw this morning when I was watching some things, and they said that since 2024, last year, the average birth rate in this country is just a hair over 1.
Yes.
Just a hair over 1.
That is not replacement.
No, not at all. You're going to shortly, and this is And I've said this a million times, and I'm going to say it again, and if it offends anybody, I don't mean to, but when you take a look at that birth rate of like 1.1, 1 point maybe 2, okay, and just not that long ago, it was at least 1.5. Now it's down to just a hair over 1. But there are certain segments of society that historically and forevermore will produce 5 and 6 children. And guess what happens, folks? In 2 or 3 generations, you're going to be outnumbered. So if you wonder why some people can get elected in a community, you say, how could they ever elect that person? Because that community has grown up so many voters because of the birth rate. And then all of a sudden they can outvote you, which is what they're doing.
And the new generations do not understand. They do not understand history. I was listening to this senator talking about how Europe should know the situation that they're in with Russia. They saw it in World War I with Germany. Mm-hmm. They saw it in World War II with Germany. Now Russia is doing the same things to them, and they should know this. And the answer is no, they don't. Germany did it in World War I to their great-grandparents, and in World War II to their grandparents. But these people have no experience in that. They have no handed-down stories. They have no handed-down history of that. So no, they don't know where they're going.
I saw a short story last week, and I'm just assuming that it's correct. It may, but you can now be arrested in England for flying the English flag.
That's correct.
That is insane. Can you imagine if you came into this country, although there's going to be certain parts of this country it's going to happen, I'm telling you, that they come in and say you can no longer fly the American flag.
Well, they have no freedom of speech in England. Understand, and for the people listening, especially the kids, they have this, what is referred to as a normalcy bias. They think the rest of the world is like us, and it's not.
No.
You have no freedom of speech. You have no right to bear arms. They have no, in England, in Germany, in France, Ireland, the Netherlands, you name it, any of the Western world. We're in a battle for the Western world right now. There is no Constitution and no Bill of Rights that we enjoy here. So yeah, somebody was flying, and people complained they were offended by it, and the police came and told them they had to take it down. Yes.
Well, and also they've lost freedom of speech in Europe, but in England a lot. They've lost their ability to speak up. They cannot speak because you'll be arrested if you don't toe the line on what you're saying.
Well, I've seen these rallies, and you hear what they're saying. I hope that what is being broadcast is real. It's so hard anymore to tell what's real. They showed a giant protest. What the protest is actually for, I don't know. But it has this Brit making this fiery speech about how, our country has been taken over. We need to take it back. And arguably 1 million people showed up. And there are similar things happening, supposedly, in France and in the Netherlands and in other places. And this is not by accident. And the reason it's happening there and happening here, supposedly, is by people involved in the corporate world who want to break down national borders, who want to replace the national populations with a whole morass of people who may or may not share the same values, because their goal, and you talked about a little earlier, is to reduce the population, have a maintenance style population that will be servants for the upper class, and the single world we run by a few people, and that's what it's all about, and that's part of the unlimited war that we're in now, because everybody thinks they're going to be in charge. China thinks they're going to be in charge. The Islamists think they're going to be in charge. America thinks we'll be in charge because the good guys always win, right?
Yep.
So I'm not sure. You and I probably aren't going to live to see who's going to be in charge.
Well, I'd like to think not, but, I do, like you, I've got 2 generations behind me now, actually 3, my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. So I've got 3 generations behind me that I won't be here to defend them. I only hope they're going to be prepared to defend themselves. That's what I'm hoping. Because if they're not prepared to, and I try to feed my daughter especially, I try to give her as much information as I know constantly. And she follows stuff pretty closely. But I try to feed her stuff that I've been able to look at and research where she doesn't have the time to do that. But I want her to understand. She raises my granddaughter, great-granddaughter. And so I try to give her as much information as I can about education and the things that are happening in the education world and so on. So I do that for one reason. When I'm gone, who's going to be speaking up? That's my concern. Who's going to be telling what I believe is the truth about what's happening? Not the blurb and the stuff that they feed you on TV or on the internet today, but what's really happening. And I do that just for that very reason, because I won't be here to defend anybody or speak up for anybody. I hope that they get enough information they can do it for themselves.
Well, and now I think with the death of Charlie Kirk, there is a big push. The top of mind, the flavor of the month, is this whole idea of dialogue and reaching across the aisle and being able to talk with people. And they're basing it on Charlie Kirk's being able to have dialogue. But there's some things that are being conflated now that really aren't exactly right. I think that in some instances, Charlie Kirk tried to base his life on the life of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who would go and dine with tax collectors and prostitutes and the dregs of society. He would reach out to them, and Charlie Kirk did much the same thing. Right. He put up a provocative statement like, "A big government sucks. Prove me wrong," or it later just got to be, "Prove me wrong." And if you disagreed with him, you got pushed to the front of the line because he wanted to have dialogue with people who disagreed with him. But what he didn't do was he didn't go out and party with these people. He didn't go out and smoke dope and drink booze and carry on with women and do all the things that they're famous for doing. He didn't change his views to align with them. Most of the time, and I have not seen very much where he softened his stance on things. He was very respectful, and he would ask questions, and he would go back and forth, but he always stood firm on his belief in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and Christianity. He stood firm on constitutionalism and conservatism, and he stood for the rule of law, okay? And talked about how to keep America the way it needs to be, you have to have borders, you have to have rules, you have to have laws. And although he had some very spirited back and forth with these people, and they're very quick now, and apparently, from what I've seen from Erica Kirk, they have thousands of hours of his speeches, and I've gone back and started watching them and watching Rush Limbaugh as well. But if we're going to have this kind of dialogue, having dialogue doesn't mean compromise, because Charlie didn't compromise. He didn't compromise on anything. He would tell people they made good points. He didn't say, "I agree with you." He said, "Well, you've made some good points here," and he was in Oxford, England, having a debate with some of their best and brightest, which I thought was, let's use the word brave. I thought it was very brave, because they had time to prepare, and they could just, on any subject, they could go after him. But I think his faith and his belief in the American Constitution, the American government, carried the day, okay? But he would go in and they'd say, "Well, what is, where's your volume?" He says, "I go into arguments always wondering, always thinking, I might be wrong about something. I'd like to. That's why I have people who disagree with me. President Trump does much the same thing when he has a committee studying something. He hires what he calls a contrarian, and the contrarian comes in and tries to find everything wrong with his plan. Well, and so that Trump thinks, that could go wrong. Let's see if we can fix that. That could go wrong. Let's see if we can fix that. That may not be a good idea. Maybe we ought to change this. And so Charlie would go in, and he would listen and find places where his argument might not be as stout as it was. And he was over his very short tenure of like 12 years. I mean, he started when he was 18, and he was shot and killed at 31.
Right.
So the 13 years, I guess. But at any rate, he did not compromise. He didn't come back to saying, well, maybe Jesus was just a nice guy. No. Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and his most important task was to spread the gospel. And then to have the political things were second. And he was in a unique position, because here's a guy who was told by the pastors, don't bring that political stuff in here, okay? Don't bring that political stuff in here. And then was told by the politicians, don't bring that religious stuff in here. So he was denied by the state, or the state of the church, the state of the political world, that to not. But he went ahead and did it anyway.
I was surprised at the number of universities, looking at the attitude of a lot of universities today, which is certainly, almost anti everything, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. And yet he was able to go in and set up a tent on their property and gather 2,000-3,000 young people together, college students. But the thing that I found most amazing of a lot of the young, not all of them, but a good percentage of the young people that came forward, they thought they were so bright. They thought they were Albert Einstein in whatever their field of study was. I'm the smartest person that ever lived. And they would literally start their conversation by talking down to Charlie Kirk about, you're so uninformed. You never went to college. You didn't graduate college. You know nothing. I've been to college for 4 years. I know everything. And so they would start out with that attitude, but as soon as he was able to, I'll call it, put them in their place on the area of knowledge about something, all of a sudden they kind of either backed off a little bit or said, yeah, okay, I guess I understand what you're trying to tell me. There were some that were belligerent right to the end, okay? But they really came after him because they thought they were so much smarter.
Well, he had an amazing ability to have recall. Our pastor,
absolutely.
Joshua Goodwin over at the Independent Baptist Church of Sebring, has just an amazing recall of Scripture. And while he's preaching, all of his references go back to other places in Scriptures. And in Timothy it says this, and if you go back to Deuteronomy it says this, and he's able to pretty much quote chapter and verse. And Charlie could do that not only with Christian belief, but also with the Constitution.
Yes.
And also everything from speaking about Israel to who was going to win the National Football Championship. I mean, he had an amazing ability to do that. It's something that we don't normally have. But I'll tell you, there's a great article in the Heritage Foundation about how colleges rationalize political violence, and they talk about how college professors routinely assign books by leaders of radical groups that murder people to advance their political goals, and so they begin to get that same kind of idea, so that when these people are in indoctrination centers, and Charlie would talk about how, one kid came up and he was talking about economists. And Charlie said, well, have you seen Thomas Sowell? He goes, yeah, well, I read his book. Do we teach him here? He says, well, not yet. And then he started going through other ones. This one. Right. He says, well, no. He says, then you're not getting an education, you're getting an indoctrination. So these kids come up and they are so sure that they know everything because they know everything that the professors have told them, which is not everything.
That's right. And that's exactly right. And it was interesting to watch. That's why I watched so many of them, because I was delighted to just watch some of these kids come up who thought they were so very smart, and yet within a few short minutes of dialogue back and forth, he was able to, in some cases, not all cases, some of them were still thick-headed, what I call thick-headed right to the very end. But some of them walked away and they had their mind changed or altered, or the thought process altered, because they had learned something from him that they didn't hear from anybody else.
And that's why it's going to be up to us to talk to these kids. And I've talked about this in the past. And when you're talking to your kids or your grandkids and they're spouting this stuff off, you really have to be able to hold it in and not get angry. And Charlie was with a bunch of female adult movie stars.
I saw that video.
And he was very soft-spoken. And he just kept telling you, the Lord has a higher purpose for your life. And they were rather crude with him. And he took it, and they said, well, you're very respectful. He says, well, that's the Lord working in me. He says, if it was me, I'd be kicking and screaming, but I turned to the Lord. It's going to be up to us as the adults in the room to listen to this and realize that no matter how boneheaded it sounds and how can my kid possibly believe this, you have to have dialogue and say, look, that's really not the way things work.
It must be very disappointing. I didn't have that opportunity, but it must be very disappointing for parents who raise their children in, religious homes, conservative homes, to see their kids go away for 4 years and come home hating them because of what their ideas were 4 years ago. I mean, it has to be so demoralizing, especially if you're the one paying the bill, which in a lot of cases that's what it is. The parents pay the bill for the kid to go to school. The kid goes there, he becomes indoctrinated, becomes hateful of his parents because of their beliefs.
Yes.
And yet he had those same beliefs 4 years ago. So it is absolutely, indoctrination is what they get, especially in college, but also I think in high school and even in some cases down in grade school.
Well, it's I'll tell you that one of the first things that happens is you blame yourself. What did I do wrong? If I had only done this one thing, this never would have happened. And the reason that we do that is because it somehow gives you the idea that you have some power over this. If I'd have only sent him to a different school, if I had only made him work a summer, whatever thing that you think you could have done to have changed things, and the answer may be, oh, here comes the truth train, right on time. The answer is, you may not have any power over this, and now it's going to be, you have to monitor these kids while they're there. That's why Charlie, one of his big beginnings was the colleges are a scam.
Right.
And that you can learn, and he was living proof, that you could learn everything you need by reading books and by studying things. And Larry Arnn, who was the headmaster at Hillsdale College, challenged him, and Charlie came back with 31 certificates of completion. How he read books, did all this stuff with Hillsdale, all these other things, it's just an astonishment to me.
Oh yeah.
But he was a driven guy.
Yep.
So it may be up to us to say, you know what, I think maybe you ought to sit out a semester. Let's sit out a semester and let's work on some things together. And as grandparents and as parents, it's going to require some work to begin to recoup these kids. The kid that is accused of shooting and killing Charlie Kirk was radicalized on the internet. Yep. He wasn't radicalized in a college.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
He was radicalized on the internet. And as you say, we have to be very cautious about where they go and continue to engage them in dialogue to make sure what they believe and where they're going.
Well, it's the other thing is that these colleges have gone so far off. I listen to Victor Davis Hanson a lot, and I know you do too, but since he still teaches at colleges, he's got his fingers on the pulse of what's going on. And he will flat out tell you on his programs, on his podcast, how bad colleges are for kids today and how corrupt the colleges have become, because he's seen it with his own eyes. He works with these people. And he said people that were friends of mine for many years, because of my stance on things and because I came out in, not promoting so much, but, agreeing with what Trump said, and I would say that, they defriended me. No longer wanted anything to do with me, wouldn't talk with me. And here's a man that is smarter than all get out, okay? And yet his friends, just because of his political leanings, all right, which I believe are the correct ones, my opinion, all right, they have disowned him.
And that's why it's time to, you and I the other day did our second live edition of the Barry Foster podcast before a live audience. And I want to do it again. Mm-hmm. I want to find other venues where we can do this, because I think in many cases it may be the same thing as the Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk proved me wrong, where we can take questions from the audience, have dialogue with people, and I think, number one, it changed hearts and minds of kids. Number two, it gave kids who already kind of believe that way a safe place to come. Here was a champion. Here was their Goliath. Here was their champion to come forward and argue for them. And he would constantly tell them, please be quiet, let them talk. He wanted to have back and forth dialogue. He wanted to show them, monkey see, monkey do and all that. Show them how to have dialogue, and it's going to be up to us to show who is the responsible people, who are the people who want to have dialogue, and who are the people who will not have dialogue and walk the other way. You kind of have to show, and I think that's one reason, for instance, Democrats have just been losing people left, right, and in between, and there are people who are like Bill Maher, who's a classic liberal, but he does not believe in any of this woke stuff.
No, I mean, he's been pretty straightforward lately when it comes to recognizing right from wrong,
yes,
good from bad. He'll speak up. And he was one of the last persons I thought would do this, but I think it finally got so bad he couldn't defend it anymore, especially on things like he's very strong against men and girls sports, and he speaks out loudly about
Absolutely.
That. And I think it wasn't a problem 5 years ago, but as it got worse and worse and worse, and you could see the inequity between men participating with girls in sports. And then the other part was the absolute insanity of men going into girls' locker rooms and disrobing and showering with girls there. And I mean, that, I think, was kind of the tipping point for a lot of people, and said, this is nonsense. This is crazy.
The whole thing about genderism, where men can't become women, women can't become men. You and I can't become African Americans or Asians or Middle Eastern. We nope. Can't we can't become dogs and cats. But that's where they're pushing these kids, and that's why it's going to be up to us to come and say, let's be reasonable about this. And sometimes it takes some tough love. Sometimes your kid keeps doing the same thing over and over, and pretty soon you got to take the car keys for a while.
Yep.
And say, look, we're going to have to behave in polite, and it's taking polite society. Polite society said, you cannot rejoice in somebody's death, okay? And people lost their jobs. People lost friends. And there's, certain behaviors will not be tolerated. And they call it cancel culture. I say it's just straight up accountability.
Yeah, a large part of it is, but again, I think these kids become so brainwashed, especially if their brainwashing begins in high school. Mm-hmm. Let's say it begins in 10th grade. So you've got 3 years in high school of being brainwashed, and then you go off to college for 4 years or more. You become 4 more. Now you've got 7 years of brainwashing. Pretty soon, if you're not strong enough to discern right from wrong, but I think you've said it and whatnot before, and that is, if you want to pass this professor's class, you have to go along to get along.
Yes.
You may not believe what he's telling you. You may, behind the scenes, you say he's he's an absolute fool. But if you want to pass that course, you want to get that grade, you toe the line, and so on. And that's the unfortunate part. To me, it's like almost ransom. I'm going to ransom you.
Yeah,
okay?
That's exactly what it is. And now it's time, I think, for a couple of things to happen. One is to begin to pull your kids out of schools, especially if they're teaching things that you don't want taught, because you now have homeschooling. And we were talking to some people who kind of pool their homeschooling. The dad teaches something, the mom teaches something, the other kid's dad and mom teach other things, and they work together there. And to begin to funnel your kids into schools like Liberty University and other schools, and as these schools, they build up these huge endowments. Okay, they're going to be able to go for a long time without any kids, without kids pumping money into it. Yep. But as you begin to pull out, I think the capitalism will take its toll, and they're going to say, well, we're going to have to change if we're going to want to have students there. And I think other schools will rise up to fill that void. And the kids need not only book learning, but they need some hands-on learning as well.
Well, there almost should be, and you would have to look at it, you'd almost have to say that there should be some courses that are mandatory that can help right the ship.
Yes.
Okay, in other words, you have to take let's say, pick a civics class in high school. You must take a civics class to ground yourself in the Constitution. There must be some other kind of class that's mandatory to take in order to graduate that helps right the ship just a little bit to counter some of the craziness that they're being fed by all these teachers or professors.
And do we have enough time to do this? I don't know. But I do know this. If we don't do anything, I can guarantee you we'll lose.
Well, the unfortunate part of it, I think like you mentioned earlier, we're beginning to see the downside of, I think, indoctrination and consumption of what they get off the internet and elsewhere. And that is when these young people start creating unbelievable things and killing people. All right, the shooter of Charlie Kirk. All right, and then the shooter of the young guy that shot up the Dallas detention center.
Oh, the Catholic school shooter.
Well, the Catholic school shooter, but also we don't know yet. He was an older fellow, 40 years old, the guy that just did all the shooting yesterday at the Church of Latter-day Saints.
Yes.
And killed at least 4 people. They said it could certainly go much higher. But was he radicalized? Now, the interesting thing is there were 2 mass shootings this weekend, both done by former Marines, both served in Iraq and Afghanistan. The one that shot up the people on the restaurant on the water in North Carolina was highly decorated. They read off today the badges and all of the certificates and that he got for his heroism. Mm-hmm. He received all kinds of the battle rewards and so on. So he got all that, and yet he still went off the deep end. Was there some connection between the background of these 2 guys? Because they both had a very similar background, and yet they both do this heinous act on Sunday.
I think now with Kash Patel in charge of the FBI, that you will have people who will begin to unpack this and find out where this came from.
Well, they will. And they'll dive into their social media site unbelievably. They'll find everything that he ever posted, everything he ever watched, everything he ever listed, both of them, and find out, did they become radicalized, or was it the result of the time they served in war? And did that have something to destroy their mind?
Yeah, I remember during World War I think they called it shell shock. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys came back from things that they'd seen and things that they were rather forced to do, and they were much different from the kids who left. And so how these guys were affected and what happened, I think that, and we'll find that on the days to come.
PTSD came along with the most recent wars and so on. So yes, so there's got to be, and if there is something they could pinpoint on how it acted on their brain, is that something you should look at when you bring in new recruits into the service?
Absolutely.
In other words, if recruits coming into the service have this mindset or this mind bend that says they can flip out at any time, they may not be candidates, especially when it comes to going to war. All right? They may not. They may be people that, I'm sorry, based on your background and everything we've been able to find out about you, you're not a candidate for us.
Yeah, and I want to find out about these awards that were given and how they were recruited, because we know under past administrations there have been DEI requirements that had to be fulfilled. People who may or may not normally have been allowed into the service were recruited into the service, what they were supposed to do, and how awards were given out. I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of unpacking here.
Well, if you remember, going back 10 years, 12 years ago, when that, I can't remember what nationality he was, but that guy on the base in North Carolina shot and killed, I think, 10 or 12 soldiers.
Yes.
Okay, and obviously he had something maybe he was just radicalized. Maybe he didn't have a mental issue, but he was radicalized, which I think was the case. But he then killed because of his radical consumption, and he had something in his background on his record that showed that he was a bad dude.
That was
and yet they kept him in there.
A different administration.
I know, but then look at what happened.
And the stuff that you'll never find that was unpacked. In
Right.
fact, we got more stuff to talk about, but we're out of time for today.
Unbelievable.
So, hey, but don't worry. We're going to pick it up again tomorrow. You're not going to want to miss that. It's going to be a barn burner. You've been listening to the latest edition of the Barry Foster Show, recorded right here at the Ridge Floor Studios, located in the city of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. Any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for the program, just put them on the comments below. We always love to hear and see your comments, things you'd like us to talk about, people you'd like us to interview. Also, we have sponsorships coming available. If you'd like to get a sponsorship package for our introductory offer, just go to thebarryfostershow@gmail.com. Check out this page every weekday, Monday through Friday. We're going to try to have a new, more than 100 episodes up now. And please like and subscribe, and join our pages at the Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram. As we continue to look for truth, justice, and the American way, Barry Foster and John Larsen, and we'll see you next time